Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Factorio. Last time we were doing a bunch more science. I think we're going to take a break from the sciencing and actually get some work done. Novel concept, I suppose. We had tried to figure out exactly which direction, or what preference rather, placement would be made whenever you're emptying things from a chest by using a fast inserter. You can see right here. Just the way that the parts actually move as they're going. That the preference tends to be in, I think it was, what did we determine it was? I think it was the northern and eastern directions. Or northern and western directions, that's right. There's almost like a new northwest rule. You can even see the parts sort of gravitate when they get placed from the different directions there. So we're going to go ahead and clear all this stuff out here and start actually building some infrastructure. I was doing a little bit more thinking as well on the system that I had worked on, I think it was 2 episodes ago, when I was working towards getting a, trying something new with a crafting system, with a, a smelting system. Man, I cannot talk today. The idea was to try to do a different orientation of it, to be like sort of a wedge shape, just for the almost for the sake of being different. I think it actually can work, but I think I'm gonna have to redo things a little bit in terms of the way that I was thinking of how it would work. And my original plan was, and I think I actually, I think I actually got rid of it completely. My original plan was to set up a wedge like this, full of, different parts being being drawn in. So I'd have, a line for iron, and then the iron would come in, and these furnaces would pick up the iron, and then they'd have another line on the outside for coal, and they would pick them up from there. But I think if I want to do something like this, I'm gonna need to do this in a way that actually has both the coal and the iron on the same line. And that's fine. I can do that. My original worry was that it would be too difficult to have that actually work properly if I didn't have everything sorted correctly. In addition, it kind of deviates from my original plan. If you remember what I was setting up here with the whole, bus system, if you will. My goal with this was to create a line for each type of material that would remain full, or even multiple lines if necessary that would remain full, so that I could make maximal use out of the materials that I was making in a way that just makes a lot of sense and keeps things very efficient. And I won't be able to transport, say, coal or iron on these lines as well if I do that. Now, I know for a fact that iron ore and copper ore are not actually needed in and of themselves for pretty much any recipes. I'm actually fairly certain about that. You don't actually have full access to everything here, but just sort of mentally clicking through here, I don't believe there's anything that specifically requires those materials. However, I do know that there is some stuff later that needs coal, although I cannot recall exactly what that is. But I think ultimately all this really means is that I'm going to have to, before I get to the sort of bus system here, what I should really be doing is setting up a smelter array that makes use of all the in products. Okay, so all the products that I require are going to be made in the smelter array, and then the products that are put out of the smelter array will just get thrown onto the conveyors as normal, and I won't worry about the fact that the smelter array is going to have a different configuration. So just to summarize here again, on the buses, as it were, there will only be one material on each line. So just as an example, we'll say this is copper, this is iron, this is steel, this is copper wire, or, whatever. However that ends up working out. So on the bus, there's no difference between any of these. These are all, each of these lines is their own material. Whereas here, if I do want to do this sort of arrowhead configuration, which I think I do, because I think it would be pretty neat, I am going to need to have, I'm pretty sure the only way to make this space efficient is to have both the iron and, or both the ore and the fuel, I guess is probably the best way to put it, on the same line. So we'll do that, and that's fine. We can handle that. We can handle that. So what I need to do for now, though, is figure out exactly where I want to place this, because I would like not to have to redo this until possibly much later when I get through the stone furnace tech all the way to the electric furnaces. Electric furnaces are 3x3 instead of 2x2. They're much larger, so that would require a redo of the entire system. They're definitely going to be optimal because electric furnaces do not require any sort of fuel, and I am somewhat limited on coal in this area. If you guys recall, I did not actually have a large quantity of coal. I would prefer to keep my coal in usage for electricity generation, if anything, preferring to do that over the other things. The other option, of course, is to use my oil reserves for production of electricity. I can turn those into fuel and use that fuel to power my my devices. I do have an excess of oil here, quite a large amount, which will be hopefully enough to not only fuel my base, but also supply the sulfuric acid and the other materials that I'm going to need to be able to actually largely create some of the endgame materials. But you know, that's all stuff for a later date. Let's get to work here. So I'm going to go ahead and chop these small electric poles out really quickly. I'll move this stuff around. I kind of want to deforest a little bit here, actually. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of deforestation in general, but I feel like I need a little bit more room here to be able to fully construct what I need to fully construct. So let's go ahead and clear out some of these trees. Eventually, I will be able to. Oh, actually, looks like my pick is broken. Okay, do we actually have any steel yet? I don't know that I've been making any steel at all. I don't recall having made any steel. So I'm just gonna very temporarily set up a. Oh right, I need iron plates, not. Not that. So we're going to grab some iron plates, just some more. Always can use some more. And I'm just going to cook up some steel really quickly. Because I'd like to get a steel pick. That would be kind of nice. So. Another thing I was actually thinking about the other day, it's been a couple days since I recorded. This grid system here, sure it looks nice and neat, but I actually kind of think that I don't want to have these be spaced that far, because at the end of the day, there's going to be a large quantity of things on these buses. There's going to be, at a bare minimum, iron, like iron plates, copper plates, iron gears, copper wire, probably microchips, because those are used for a lot of things. Actually, let me go ahead and open up my list here so I can find what else. I mean, possibly even inserters. I mean, I'd like to run everything. Yeah, electronic circuit is what I meant. Steel plates for sure will also be on the bus, and likely even more things. Possibly even things that I just might want to mass create. So, you know, transport belts are used for science, but they're also used to create the higher tier transport belts. And at the end of the day, I'd like to be able to set up crafting stations for commonly used things to set up into a logistics network. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but there's nothing wrong with thinking ahead to make sure that you're, you know, planning for the future. So I think I may have to go with a more compact transport belt system. So we'll see how that works out. But, you know, it's always good to at least go through the motions of figuring out, you know, how you should be building things. Just because you end up changing your mind from building something doesn't mean that the sciencing that you did to figure out if that building would be viable in the first place was wasted, because it's not. You know, you really never know unless you test something in a game. And so testing things and experimenting is good. So I don't consider that to be time wasted in any form. Okay, so assuming we're going to have a large quantity of iron being produced, or rather being emptied from this line, I'm going to, at least at first, only have a single input line for the iron and then one for the coal. And then I'm also going to need another line that will feed into the copper. So, assuming I want the bus to sort of start here, which I do, I should probably have the furnace arrays down in this area, right about where I'm walking here. So, let's see if we can't get one of these started here just to get a good idea. I'm going to start, I think, with 8 furnaces. I should be able to expand a little bit more if I need to, but I think 8 may not be a bad idea to start from at first. So let's see here. Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and start building. Okay, so we got that. And then we're going to need some fast inserters, of course. These will be placing the materials into the furnaces themselves, like so. And now I need to have the materials actually coming out here. And this is where we can kind of mix things up a little bit. You know, I could do some fancy stuff with splitters. I don't know that it really matters where all I put the splitters, as long as there are enough to cover the area required. So I may even be able to do something like this. We'll have to test for optimal usage here, of course. And I can spare a little bit of the conveyor system as it is. Okay, so actually, you know what? I'm kind of afraid of a lack of optimization if I don't allow for the splitters to have a little bit of distance in between them, if you see what I'm saying. So I'm going to go ahead and back those out a little bit. I'll actually back these out as well. Yeah, because I want to make sure that I have at least a little bit of headway before I go too far into one of those. So this should be good. Pretty sure that'll be good. Make sure all these actually reach where they need to go. Looks kind of cool. I can appreciate that. And now we need to actually have the main line be split. And of course, I wanted to leave a center gap here just to make it a little neater. I mean, I suppose it's probably not that necessary, but because the output line would have to be, well, there's going to have to be some sort of asymmetry, so I might as well just make this more spatially compact in the first place. So, time for a redo. Time for a redo. There we go. Thankfully, it doesn't take too long to actually empty these things out. There we are. So I want to make sure that when I am splitting these materials, of course, that I'm doing so in an even way. That way, all materials that are input into the system will be evenly distributed from the input. That way, each part gets the same amount. So I need to make sure that this splits into even amounts for these, and then these also split. So basically, each of these furthest splitters has to be providing the maximum amount of material to the maximum amount of conveyor belts. So it's all even. Otherwise, the system will probably, or at least possibly, get gummed up, and that's just no good. That is just no good. So here we go. There we are. And so now I'm going to need to feed the inputs. So I'll have to have a coal line, obviously, and a copper line. So I want to get an even amount of each of those smelters set up. I'm just going to go ahead and make some more stone furnaces, which we're going to need some more stone, which thankfully, past us, past me rather, was a cool guy. I decided to set up a mining operation for me for stone. Hooray! Look at that. Look at past me being a cool guy. You know what? I take back everything bad that I said about past me. He's a cool guy now. But don't tell past me that. I don't want past me to get a big head. Get all egotistical about it. Because you know he will. You know past me is full of himself. So. Present me, though, I mean, I don't know. I consider myself to be a pretty humble person. You know, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I think I'm really, really humble. Get some more of these inserters set up. So we're going to need a couple more. Boop, boop. So much construction. And I guess I can make the rest of the funnel here. Looks like I'm also going to need some more splitters, which is fine. Anybody else just love the music to this game? I know I do. Very thoroughly enjoy the music for this game. We're also allowing ourselves a little bit of room here in the middle, just in case any expansion needs to be done. I like to, as I've said before, I want to go for compact but expandable. I think that's the best way to build here. There's always the temptation when you're playing a game like this to just try to go absolutely nutso with making everything super, super compact. And ultimately what that's going to run you into is some serious problems with expandability. And I can already feel like I'm probably going to have some issues with this in the first place anyway, just because of how it's sort of oriented right now, and the fact that I didn't leave myself a gap at all, but I don't know. Building things it's not really that time consuming, especially when you get to the later tiers of the game, and you get the automatic construction robots that can fly around and disassemble and reassemble your buildings at will. So, not a huge deal. As long as you're trying to, as long as you're trying. I think as long as you're trying, you're probably in good shape. Okay, so I need to have a single line that's feeding into both of these. So let's get another splitter. I need a couple more of these at least. And I want to have coal on one end and iron on the other end. Let's see here. So we'll do that. Okay, so this is the main splitter from which all material will be sorted. And actually, no, I'm kind of curious if I can just use the splitters sort of as they're intended in this way. Let me try something here. We're going to do a little bit of science, because we do like doing science. So I'm going to, this is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to set this up with one side producing, or rather, one side filling in one material and the other side filling in the other, and see if this splitter will actually just do its job in evenly distributing the materials to both sides. I don't think it will. I think it will, but I don't think it will in the way that I want it to. I think it'll go like every other. So say I'm bringing the iron in here and the coal in here. I think it'll put out 2 iron, then 2 coal, then 2 iron, then 2 coal, and that's going to cause a huge gumming up of the system. So I can't really do that. But just to be sure, because we are scientists and we test everything, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So let's just put wood on one and coal in the other, and we'll see how this ends up splitting. Or maybe this will work. Really? I kind of want to make sure that this will actually work. Let me just load these up a little bit more to make sure I don't miss a beat. I'm just going to grab from 1/2 and see if it still stays how it was. Ah, okay. Yeah, there we go. You guys see? Everything started off fine. And then as soon as I started grabbing from 1/2, it starts jamming up a little bit. That is unfortunate. Thought I had something there, but not quite. Just goes to show, very important to thoroughly test your ideas, even if it looks like on the surface that they'll work. So that is kind of unfortunate. It didn't quite work how I wanted it to. Although it did, I don't know, part of it did kind of look like it was due to the fact that the curves were here, and that it was causing a little bit of a sort of disruption because of the curve, but even so, I don't think from a practical standpoint that this is actually going to work properly. So what I'm instead going to do is I'm going to feed iron from one side of this and coal from another side. That way I can hopefully very clearly push all the material onto this line. I need to make sure that I'm using an optimal setup for the distribution of all these materials. So let's see here. So I'm basically just going to test the same thing, except using these splitters to put it onto a single line instead of having it being on 2 lines like it was a second ago. I'm going to have a single input line and make sure that this will likewise distribute everything properly. So I'm just going to do basically the same test here. Should probably be lighting this area up a little bit here for you guys at home. There we go. Okay. So that seems to be working. Pretty much as well as I had hoped it would. It looks like it's inserting the items onto the bar, or onto the conveyor belt, fairly reasonably well. I am a little worried about the throughput being enough, but I guess time will tell if that actually ends up being an issue or not. Although we should also stress test this just to be on the safe side, because we did have a failure of a stress test before. So we will double check that and make sure that there will be no failure this time. So what I'm going to do for that is I want to have this completely fully loaded with material, as though it was waiting for things to be smelted by having a little bit of an extension of the conveyor here. And then I'm going to take some material pseudo-randomly off of the conveyor to ensure that everything works properly. So do our normal double loading thing. My overarching goal for this is to make sure that I'm evenly using and properly using my transport belts. In previous playthroughs of Factorio, I've had some major consistency issues with trying to have too many different things on the same conveyor, and then that ends up causing a ton of issues. Actually, I need to grab some more coal. Hey, look at that! There's a bunch of coal right here. Whoop! Just gonna go ahead and grab that real quick. Thank you. Coal, multi-purpose material, not only used for fuel, but also used for science. Not in-game science, but out-of-game science. So what I want to do here is I want to take a bunch of this stuff just to simulate movement, and I want to see if this continues to distribute these materials at a reasonable pace. So I'm just going to grab some random stuff here. And, okay, this is what I was afraid of. This is exactly what I was afraid of. I was afraid that only one side of this would end up being taken until a certain point. So, again, I need to make sure that I'm manipulating these materials to work as cleanly as possible. One of the ways I could potentially do this is actually to just use inserters to load this conveyor no matter what. Just constantly be using inserters to ensure that the product flow is used properly. It's actually surprisingly difficult to have a double-edged system like this where one conveyor system is actually loading from both sides evenly, that all the materials are being used from both sides of conveyor belt evenly. It's very challenging to do this, and I think the only real practical solution that I can think of is likely just to use the fast inserters. There may be some sort of a trick with splitters, and I'm going to continue testing this just to be sure, but I think as soon as this system gums up, it's likely going to, yeah, like as soon as it gums up, and this is pretty clear just by way of how the pieces are being taken, that as they're being taken, the only one that's actually going to be able to make it onto the conveyor belt is the one on the far right. So that alone is the very reason that this will actually do that. I would like to instead be able to, as I've stated, funnel the entirety of a transport belt in at an equal pace. So let's try to experiment a little bit more. I don't mind using fast inserters if I have enough of them. It should be more than fine to be able to do that, to convey them equally onto a transport belt. But I don't know. Hard to say. So another thing we could try, and I don't know that this will make a difference, but we'll try it anyway, is instead to move these over to the other side. Sometimes a simple solution can be found. So I'm going to do that. We're going to go ahead and grab all these materials again. Blah, 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 blah. No. Okay. And then I'm going to load these up. Coal and wood. And of course, for now, the sorting is doing quite well. It's taking basically one from each end and placing them in. So that's quite fine. And then we're getting close to the point where it's going to start gumming up a little bit. Another thing I just noticed too is it seems like these lines take a little bit longer to fill. And I wonder why that might be. Okay, and again, it's only pulling from one side. Okay, so that's not surprising. I didn't really feel like adjusting the input from this line would in any way have really solved that issue. But again, you know, we're testing behavior. So I think the fundamental issue here is that this is only getting loaded from one end. Very clearly only getting loaded from one end. And that's the very, very edge. So I need to find a system that will evenly distribute one piece off of each direction, off of each edge of a conveyor. I need to find a way to do that. So we're going to need to do a little bit more sciencing. Because it's fine if this only feeds in one piece at a time, as long as I have a mechanism to take the inputs from that line and evenly distribute them regardless of what's going on. So let's try doing something with fast inserters. So if we have just a line, and then we have some fast inserters pulling from that line, one from each edge, of course, and then have these lines congregating towards each other. Whoa! We need some iron. Let's go get some iron. Should probably be sciencing something, huh? Oh, look at that. I actually have science packs on me. Derp. Yo, dog, I heard you like science. Create a couple more transport belts. Now, it is possible this actually isn't going to fix anything either. Of course. But that's why we experiment. So let's see here. Yeah, I mean, I guess the fundamental issue is how do I force... Because, okay, so here's what's going to happen. Here's the way I'm envisioning this. Regardless of what sort of shenanigans I do here, it's always going to be the case that only one of the materials on this line is going to get pulled from here. Meaning that, you know, it doesn't matter how fancy I make this. The only material that's going to be pulled out of this splitter is the fourth one. Meaning that, and that's going to always be the one on the right side, regardless of how I feed lines into this. So this part of this is definitely not going to work. I could potentially envision a solution wherein we have a... This is a tough problem. This is a very tough problem. This is much harder than I thought it would be, actually. Either that or I'm way overthinking it. One of the two. Very, very likely. I'm very possibly overthinking this, because that does have a tendency to happen for me. So I want to have a line that is being evenly distributed to, without losing any of its integrity. And when we pull material from a line, the only way to pull from both sides evenly is to have an inserter from on both ends. I'm fairly certain there's no other way to do it. Like if you pull from only like one edge like this, it's only going to pull from the right side until the left side is completely expended. But then, when we do that, we run into the problem of how do we actually get these distributed evenly? Because I don't care if it's only pulling from one side. What I want to have happen is I just want to make sure that this thing isn't going to get gummed up to the point where I can't evenly and equally produce materials because it's only pulling materials from one edge of the input line. You know? There are going to be ways to solve this problem later on when I'm doing the massive crafting things. Like, for example, if I have a crafting station set up, ideally I would have two crafting stations set up, one of which is pulling from each side of the line, and then both of which are depositing to different sides of the output line, ensuring that equal amounts of product are coming in and equal parts of product are coming out on the same line. But I think this particular solution is going to require something quite unique. The alternative is just to say screw it and say this isn't actually a problem at all and just deal with it. And hope that I can manage to make this flow evenly and equally without that issue, but I don't like saying just screw it and let's go. So that doesn't seem like a solution to me. But either way, I think we're running out of time for this episode. I'd like to get some more sciencing done, and I'll be doing a little bit more thinking on this, trying to figure out exactly how to fix this. But that'll be the next episode of Let's Play Factorio. Thanks for watching, everybody.